ahead.
Good evening, ladies. There's 25 of us according to the Zoom service we're using. Good evening or good afternoon, based on where you're located. I'm Susan Farber. I co-chair Women's League Reads with Merle Harris. Merle is living in New Hampshire. I normally am in Cincinnati, Ohio, but this evening I am in a hotel room on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on vacation. So I'm looking out and I could see the waves of the northern end of Lake Michigan. So I welcome all of you here for our last program of Women's League Reads for this calendar year. Merle and I were asked to organize 3 programs for the upcoming year. The first date will be November 17th, Thursday evening, November 17th. Hopefully over the summer, we will share with you the details of which author and book which author will be interviewed about the book that she has written on November 17th. But I will welcome you on behalf of the International Board of Women's League for Conservative Judaism. And I believe my role is to introduce our author, a young woman who now is living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Her name is Zhanna Slor. I think hopefully I'm not ruining your names, Zhanna. It's
close enough.
She was born in the former Soviet Union in the Ukraine, and she moved to the Midwest when she was a young child in the early 1990s. And she has been writing quite successfully in terms of being published in several literary journals and magazines. We are going to talk this evening about her writing process and her debut novel, which is called At the End of the World, Turn Left, which is an actual phrase in the book at some point. Maybe we will talk about the title, so we're not too much of a spoiler. I know from one participant they have not read the book, but they're fascinated by the title and the storyline. And Merle will pose questions. If you have questions, you could add them to the chat box. You could either email everyone or you could email just to me directly if you want me to see your message, your question. And it is being recorded, Maxine. Everybody, after they entered this, they clicked either yes or no. So if you are here in the Zoom space, you have indicated that you are accepting that this is a recorded meeting. All of these recorded interviews appear on the Women's League website under Women's League Reads page, as Merle has included in a chat message to all of us. So without further ado, Merle, have I forgotten anything?
I think we're good. I've got some questions. We're ready to hear about the book. Great, thank you. So welcome, Zhanna. I guess I could start if we switch to your picture in the chat. That would be great. There you are, our star. Thank you so much for joining us. I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself when you came to the US and what your childhood was like growing up as a Jewish Soviet immigrant to the United States in the Midwest.
Well, it's really similar to Anna's story. She's based on myself at her age. I came from Ukraine when I was about 5, so a little older than she is in the book. But we moved to Milwaukee, and like my whole family came to Milwaukee, and then we ended up just moving around a bunch to different suburbs. Then I ended up in Chicago, and then I'm back in Milwaukee as of a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, growing up was very similar to Anna's story, where I was kind of like in between the cultures of the Russians that lived here, like just Russia in general and America. We're kind of in the middle because you're the subculture. But then on top of that, we moved kind of to the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, where there were no other Russians or Jews. So basically just ignored that part of our identity for about 5 to 10 years. But that was like some crucial years, I guess. So like Anna, when I left as an adult, I didn't really know where I fit in terms of that or anything else, which is part of her attraction to River West. I had the same thing where it just felt like a community, because I didn't feel like I was getting that from my own family or the Russian community in Milwaukee. It's not like in Brighton Beach where everybody is Russian and you can kind of just keep your culture the same. They're more spread out here and there's not as many of them. And it's a different experience, kind of disorienting, I guess. Hope that explains it.
So that's so. And do you have siblings? Did you have like a sister, like
Yes,
Lasra?
I have a sister, but she's nothing like the girl in the book. She's actually a doctor and she lives in California.
And did you go to Israel, or did she go to Israel and find some connection there, or is that an autobiographical part?
That is not. I'm not really religious. I did go to Israel a lot of times because marrying an Israeli, you just end up in Israel a lot. We went like almost every year for a while before all the lockdowns and stuff. And I went there a couple of times before I met him also. And I really like the place. It's an interesting culture. I didn't identify with the religious aspect. Most young people don't. So, but I felt like I could fit in there if I wanted to stay. I didn't. I tried to live in Jerusalem and it just wasn't for me as someone who's not very religious. And just not knowing Hebrew also. I mean, I could get by with Russian, but my Russian by then was pretty bad. So we stopped kind of speaking Russian in my house around the age of 10. So it just kind of went downhill after that. I can get by, but I can't have like deep conversations with anybody.
So talk a little bit about the idea of, so in the book, you have your grandparents, your parents, and then the 2 sisters. And each generation seems to have a different, are you outside?
I am. I'm actually at my cousin's house for like this family dinner and there's screaming toddlers inside. I hope you can't hear them.
Okay. Like, no, it looks like you're ducking bugs or something.
Yeah, I am ducking bugs. It's landing on my face. It's fine.
Anyway, so the 3 generations, talk a little bit about how each of them related differently to the move to the United States in the book.
Yeah, sure. So very different reactions because the older people never really learned English. And then they just lived in the same apartment building that's in the book. Like all my grandparents and their siblings all lived in the same building. They never really had to learn English because they were just speaking Russian to each other. It almost felt like they put their lives on hold indefinitely. Like they didn't really leave the house too much. They didn't really do much. They didn't work again. They're a little bit stuck in their past lives, but just doing it here and better, I guess, because they weren't starving. And then my parents' generation had like probably the hardest time just in terms of having to move here, learn English, raise their kids, get their degrees again. Like my aunt who's here right now, she was a doctor in the Soviet Union and then it didn't transfer when we moved. So she had to go back to school and she just went back to nursing school because getting a med school degree all over again here in her 30s would have been difficult with children. So they had definitely a difficult adjustment in terms of just situationally and learning the language at their age. It's harder in your 30s and 40s to learn a language.
Right.
And just having to start all over. At least my family back then was all kind of in the same Milwaukee area. Now they're kind of more spread apart. But so they had a very different time, and they were very like anti-Russia. We're all American now, American dream all the way. Let's be middle class, live in the suburbs. And then you have the younger generation, and they kind of had different reactions. Like most of my family members, my age, like cousins and stuff, really did follow what their parents said. Like, you know, go get a cushy job. My sister's a doctor, husband's a doctor. I have cousins who are lawyers and engineers, like those types of jobs. I was like the weird black sheep who didn't want to do that. But I think a lot of it was like parental pressure, because, you know, they give you this idea of, well, we brought you here and we went through all this so you could have a better life. So now you need to, you know, do the things to give yourself a better life. But they had like a very black and white interpretation of what that means, at least in my opinion, because I'm more of an artist type. So part of why I didn't really fit into the whole family dynamic was that. So various reactions. Like some of my cousins feel very Russian and they go back to Ukraine sometimes. And then I have other cousins who really fell in love with Israel, kind of became religious, which is where I got the idea for Masha. And then I just have other cousins who are just kind of in the middle, where like they feel a little Russian, but it's not a huge part of their identity. And they just kind of like live their lives, basically.
And have you been back to Ukraine, or have you wanted to go?
Yeah. I wanted to go for a long time, and I ended up there, I think I was 30. So it would have been like 5 years ago, maybe. We went back to my hometown. Glad I went then and not now. But it was really interesting to go back. It felt like a very different place. And like all the Jews had gone. The synagogue was closed. The Jewish cemetery was abandoned and just falling apart. And you just get this idea of like, wow, the Jews really all left Ukraine. Like there's just none left. And then and it was kind of jarring. And then I went and saw my apartment that I grew up in there, which was really cool. I did not really recognize it because they had remodeled it, I guess, but it was really interesting to see like how small it was, because we had so many of us living there, like me, my sister, my parents, my grandma, my grandpa, in this tiny little apartment. So it was very much eye-opening as far as like, well, we do definitely have better lives here, and I'm glad we moved. And I was expecting to like connect to it more and remember things, and I just really didn't remember anything except one park. So it just felt like any other place. It was a little bit disjointing, I guess, but also it was really good to go.
Right. Interesting. So talking about languages, in the book, you do a lot with linguistics and words, and use a lot of different languages.
Yes. Sorry, was there a question? I missed.
Sorry. Yeah. So in the book, you use a lot of linguistics and different words, different languages and meanings. Are you interested in that, or did you do it just for the book, or is that something that you've studied?
No, I really am. I didn't study it, but I do, you know, I did know Russian most of my life. I learned some Hebrew when I got married, on and off. I would learn it and then forget it and learn it again. So I took French in high school. I've always really been interested in languages, and I'd written this article about untranslatable phrases back in like 2013 for a magazine. And I just remember bookmarking it in my head as something worth exploring again. So I did some research, but a lot of it I had remembered, and some, like most of them are languages that I know, like the Russian and the Hebrew stuff. think I always thought it was interesting how people seem to be different depending on their language, and how languages have different words that, other languages don't. And what does that say about the culture of that place? And I've always, thought that was interesting. I'm not a linguist by any means, though. just find it really interesting, I guess.
And then you talked about River West,
Yeah.
that neighborhood. So I did look it up to see if it was like really that was real, because you described it so beautifully, and you really can feel like the people there, and they're so I mean, it's like an unusual kind of place. Is that what it's really like? The kind of people that are there and
oh yeah.
atmosphere?
I mean, in 2007, 2008, that was a pretty accurate portrayal. I mean, all the characters were based off people I'd met there. Part of like the first thing that came for this book was the location. I wanted to write a book in River West, and I did. And I've had a lot of good feedback about it, because nobody knows about River West. It's just this tiny little pocket in Milwaukee between like the east side where the college students live and like the super shady parts of Milwaukee. It's kind of in this bubble. So you get a weird mix of, hippies, artists, some students, hipsters, and then like a ton of crime that seeps in from like, if you go 5 blocks over, it's just super shady, and they'll just come into River West to rob people and then leave. So it was a really interesting mix of places, of people, subcultures too. Very gritty, but had a really interesting community where everybody kind of knew each. Sorry, I hear my daughter screaming.
Oh.
Yeah, so really interesting place. I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if it's the same now. I don't really go there anymore, but I would imagine it is. It's one of those neighborhoods where they're like, it's up and coming, and 20 years go by, and they're like, it's up and coming. Like, you said that 20 years ago. I don't think it's coming.
So did you?
I think it's just gritty.
So did you pick to write the book in 2008 because of the culture at that time? Is that how you picked the time period?
It was a combination of, I wanted to write before smartphones came in the picture, because I think it kind of ruins a mystery if you can just track people on their phones and just know where everyone is all the time. Also, that's the River West I knew. I moved around 2009 or 10, and I think, it started to change a little bit. They had a smoking ban. Everybody started getting iPhones, kind of being more modern.
Right.
I like the little like time capsule of 2007, 2008, where like you still didn't know where everyone was all the time. You would just show up at their house, kind of like old school style, just knock on the door. And if you wanted to find someone and you couldn't call them, you just wouldn't find them. I just like that. And then also that time of my life is very memorable to me. So I had like very strong feelings and impressions and memories of that time. So I wanted to use that because it would help, get the right details and descriptions down. And I also had a ton of journals from that time period that I could access. So it was a combination of all those things.
Susan, you had a question?
Yeah, it's a follow-up question, Zhanna. You mentioned you had gone back to Ukraine, and Ukraine is very different based on where you are in Ukraine. I mean, especially with what's happened the last 3 months, it's really helped Americans and members of the world community who pay attention to see the differences in Ukraine. It's not one environment. So could you clarify for us which city or community in Ukraine you had lived in, so that we have a better idea? Is it in the West? Is it in the North, the East, which is imperiled now, or in the South, which has been destroyed?
It's in the southwest by Poland and Moldova. It's the same town as in the book, Chernovtsi. It's like a pretty big city. Mila Kunis is from there. That's like their claim to fame. But I don't think they've gotten there yet. It's pretty far out. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything about it. So I would say it's a pretty big city, but if you leave downtown, it's just like depressing. Like when we left downtown, which is super nice, cobblestone streets, all these fancy new restaurants and coffee shops, we went towards my old apartment, and it was just like a different Ukraine completely. It's got those Soviet block buildings. Everything looks the same. There's just like poor old homeless old people outside trying to sell fruit. Just very different experience depending on like where you are in the city.
Thank you.
And then driving there from the airport was insane because we drove from the middle of nowhere in this random airport. And we would be driving past these like little cottages and farm country, and like these old babushkas outside with scarves on their heads and like literally hay roofs, like you're in a different century. It was totally bizarre.
Well, it helps us understand the complexities of Ukraine, because and some parts of the world. I mean, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I shouldn't bring this in necessarily, but I just drove from Cincinnati to the Upper Peninsula, and I went through northwestern Ohio into Michigan, and on this country, more country-esque, seeing these small villages. And I even hear in driving to through the Upper Peninsula, sometimes you see houses, it doesn't even look like someone could still live there because it's so torn, horrible looking, uncared for, it needs paint or it needs significant repair, doesn't look viable, but somebody's there. You can see that there's a car park. I mean, so we have that distinction even here in America, in rural America, of, some level of intense poverty, people barely getting by, which is what you're kind of describing in Ukraine. And from the little bit we see in the report, we see that as well. So I'm going to let Merle Sweat, go back to.
All right, so let's get into the writing. So you write this book from Masha's point of view and Anna's point of view. Did you decide to do that from the beginning? Is that how you decided to write it? And did you write it like in order, chapter after chapter, or did you like write one person's story and then weave in the other person's story?
It was such a mess. I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, I started first with Anna. Anna was the only story for a while, and it just didn't have enough tension, and it didn't even have all the crime elements. It was just the story of her and the half sister and all the drama with her roommates and family. Most of which ended up getting cut, but some of it stayed in. And that came in like years back, and I had a different publisher, and then they dropped the book, so I had to like start over basically. Then somebody from Milwaukee came to me asking if I would write a short story for a crime anthology called Milwaukee Noir. And everybody was supposed to pick a neighborhood and write a short story about a crime there. And so I wrote Masha's story, like 20 pages of it. And I was picturing her in River West at the same time and like thinking of all the same stuff. So then it just made sense to kind of start interweaving the two. And then the book really started to come together. And then when I got my new publisher, they're a crime publisher, so she was really pushing me to like write more crime and not just skip over it, because I was like worried I couldn't write actual crime stuff. And then I realized I was just too stressed out for Anna to do it. And one day I just like sat down and made myself do it, even though I was really stressed out the whole time. And after I did, I was like, "Whew, I feel better. I can do it." And it really made the whole book work. So after I finished that, like that ending scene where she's at like the drug dealer's house, after that, it kind of just came together and was done. And so that took all of that took like several years, like almost 5 years, I would say.
5 years writing that.
Probably, yeah.
To get to the
finish yes.
Wow. So, you're describing it as I guess I didn't feel that that was the main piece. I mean, the crime, the mystery of where Anna is, and the like slow reveal, I think, like of actually, I guess the slow reveal, I think it's Masha's friend June. Like she keeps saying something terrible happened, and it takes a while to hear what happened. So those definitely keep you, the suspense and your reading, but I guess I would never have thought of this as like a crime kind of. To me, it is more of a novel kind of.
I would agree. I think it's kind of borderline, but just having the crime in there makes it a crime book. It's been kind of like literary. I feel like it's more for literary people, because if you look at my reviews, it's like more literary people that like it, less the crime people, just because it's not super crime heavy like my next book's a murder mystery, but this one is more like, it's more literally with some crime kind of sprinkled in there.
Right. So you've gotten used now to writing crime. Is that what happened? Now you're into
it. Well, what happened was I tried to not write a crime book, and then I was like, crap, this needs a murder. And then I added a murder, and it's made the whole book work. So, I guess I can't write anything else now.
No. So do you have a favorite character in this book, or any of the characters stand out to you as?
My favorite interactions are with Anna and Liam, or Masha and Liam, actually, not Anna. And then I guess I do like Tristan also, because he's like the one character I really just totally made up. It is a mix of people that I knew, and everyone else is pretty close to people I know. So, and then I guess my favorite though are the grandparents, because they add some levity, and they're very intense people, but they're also very funny. And then it just reminds me of my grandparents. So
that's nice that you can write a legacy for them into the book.
They're like immortalized forever.
Right. So so Masha, I guess she's like a troubled teen. Would you describe her that way? And then she goes to Israel and sort of finds herself and sort of saves herself. And then I guess I felt like, so by coming back to look for her sister, it sort of gives her a chance to to find some closure and on the life that she had in America, and sort of helps her like get rid of her baggage.
Exactly.
So that's sort of, do you think she's like so you're saying you started though with Anna's story. To me, I guess Masha seemed to be the lead character.
She becomes the lead character for sure. It's just that Anna came first, that it just in the order of the writing. But I think Masha's kind of more the important story, because she kind of gets lost but then finds herself, and with Anna we're not really sure what will happen with her. All she really needed to do is kind of like start making her own decisions, and realizing that her parents can make mistakes kind of helped her do that. So she didn't feel as much pressure to do exactly what they said once you realize they're like human beings. So I would say Masha is the lead, and I really enjoyed writing her a lot. I'm a big fan of like person returns to hometown to face demons whole trope in books. I love it. So I had a lot of fun writing that.
So we do have a question, without, I guess, giving too much of it all away for some people who may not have read this yet. Can we discuss what was your thinking as you chose where you wanted Anna to flee to?
Oh, well, I went through every version of where she could have gone, and none of them worked, like for the story. And so I just threw them all out, and that's just where she had to end up, because I ran out of other places. Like in different versions, she ended up once in Ukraine. She ended up in Israel. She ended up meeting the half sister at one point somewhere. I forgot where else she ends up. I think one time she ended up train hopping and ending up some random place. I don't know. That's just like, none of them worked until that one. And then that one worked because that's where I could see her going. Like New York.
Yeah,
being
to me, it made a
artist,
lot of sense. Yeah.
and her roommate was there. So she had somebody. So yeah, that was just from failing at all the other endings.
Did we know that her roommate was there? I missed that. I have to say, I
Yeah,
read
her
the
roommate-
last
her
50
roommate
pages
August.
this afternoon.
Yeah, her roommate August. Yeah, she ends
Oh,
up
August. Yeah, I don't count. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right.
she ends up calling.
So tell us about the title, because that is a quote in the book.
Yeah, so it means the middle of nowhere in Hebrew slang. So it has multiple meanings for me because I was thinking of it in terms of the sisters' identities being in the middle of nowhere because they're stuck in between all these cultures and not really a complete part of any culture. And then also I was visualizing it like when you get to the end of the world, you can turn left. Like there's never a place where you can be completely stuck because you can always start over and go do something else, which is also what both the sisters did.
Mm.
And also what her parents did and what the grandparents did. Like they all did that. So that's what all the generations have in common, is like being able to leave bad circumstances and start over, which is like a very like Jewish story as old as time, basically. So that's what it means. Also, it just sounds cool.
Yes, no, excellent title. So tell us a little bit about your writing style, because it sounds like you've done a lot of rewrites on this.
This one, yeah, but
Yeah.
It's so weird. Every book is different because that one took like 5 years and went through. So I probably have like 1,000 or 2,000 pages of cut stuff from that book. And it took so many years of rewriting to figure it out. But then my new book, I just wrote in 5 months in basically like one sitting. So either I learned something or it just depends what I'm trying to write. Because this book was like, I was trying to get all these ideas across on top of the plot making sense. So it's kind of complicated to keep all the characters, all the ideas, the setting, and then have a plot that was kind of page turner-esque, but not like, like thin, like a lot of mystery thrillers where I feel like it's just plot and no character development.
Right.
So I really care about characters first and then the story. So that's usually what comes first: characters, setting, then the story.
And do you like just write through, or do you like plot it out and have?
I never plot anything out. This is why it took me 5 years to write this book. I just don't work like that, and I want to be surprised too, I think, or I would be bored if I had it all plotted out. So like sometimes I'll be writing and be like, oh, I didn't think that would happen. That's cool. Like I just don't plan, and I just see what happens. I just let my brain go, and I just let it go. And sometimes it doesn't work and I delete it. And then a lot of times it works and I don't delete it. So I'm a mess. Like some people are very into planning and they have a schedule. I'm the opposite of that. I never know what part of the book I'm going to be working on that day. Sometimes I just start from the beginning and edit. Other times I'll just start a random new chapter. Sometimes I'll write 10 hours a day for 3 weeks. Sometimes, like now, I haven't written for 2 months, just completely all over the place, depending on my life and how busy I am. And like, if I can get into that mode, because once I'm in that mode, it's hard to get out. So sometimes I avoid writing just because I'm too busy and I have to wait till I have brain space for it.
Very interesting. So, and you do write a lot of articles and things also on this.
I haven't recently, but yeah.
Yeah. Because I did read today the one about Disney princesses.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I started to write like a whole book about that, and then I had to drop it because I started this new book that's coming out next spring. because it was so fascinating. All those Disney stories, they come from all these like old fairy tales with all these like metaphors and ideas that you can just like dig into forever. I wrote like 20 pages just on Sleeping Beauty. But that all stemmed from that article. At some point, I might actually write a book about that too, once I'm out of ideas for other things. It is super interesting.
Mm-hmm. So do you keep like ideas that come up and have like a, I don't know, a file or that you
I
can
do
go
write
back
stuff
to?
down sometimes, but most of the time I'll just remember and I'll start something and I'll save it in my Dropbox and then I'll like go back to it. I
Mhm.
do have like a little notepad in my phone that just for emergency ideas. So, but I haven't had one in a while just because I keep working on new books. I started my third book recently also.
Oh,
So my second book is coming out next spring. It's called Breakfall. It's a murder mystery set in Chicago. And then I started a third book that's also going to be a mystery. I don't know if there's going to be a murder in it yet. We will see. Probably though.
very interesting.
Merle, I have
there
a
are
question.
questions.
I have a
Yep.
question. The two questions that were in the chat, I believe you've already asked them, Merle.
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask, since it seems to me, Zhanna, that you write and you end up removing a certain quantity at some point because it doesn't sit well with you. Is that something you get assistance with from an editor, or are these things that happen because you realize this as the writer before your editor has any input, or is it a balance of that?
Both. I would say a lot of both. Like I do a lot of it myself before I send it to my editor, and like with this book, she had a lot of edits and we had to go back and forth a lot. And it wasn't like she said to remove it. She was just like, you need to change, you know, the tension here doesn't work. Like you need to change the way you're playing this out over these chapters. It's not like specific stuff that she cut. But then with this new book, I just sent it to her and she hasn't even sent me a single edit back. So it just depends.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
All right. So there is a question asking if you would write a sequel to this book. Do you think you would come back to these characters ever?
I don't think so, but I'm not going to say 100% no, because like maybe in 10 years I'll want to, but I have so many other ideas and completely different characters in different worlds that I want to get into. And I'm kind of sick of writing about this topic because before the book, I was writing all these essays about the same stuff, you know, like identity, Judaism, family, all that kind of stuff. I just need a little break from exploring that and want to deal with, you know, other aspects of life for now. But maybe if I just have run out of ideas in 10 years.
Do you think like I was saying that Masha comes back and sort of works through some of her issues by coming back and going back to River West and looking for her sister. Do you think by writing this book that you've worked through maybe some of your
oh yeah,
and you've
definitely.
been able to put it to rest and move on now to other?
That's why I don't want to write a sequel. I feel like I'm
Right.
over all this stuff. I'm done with it. You know, I have my own kid now. I have other things to worry about because like identity is such a young person problem. Once you have kids and you're busy, you're like, I don't have time to think about that.
But you'll want to pass all that down to,
Yes.
like the family history down to your child.
Yeah, for sure. And she's like half Russian, half Israeli. So I'm sure she'll have similar issues.
So without giving away the ending, somebody is asking about the ending, but I think that's hard to talk about, but maybe just to talk about the mother and Anna when they meet up and their interaction about um, talking about how, going back or not going back to their life.
Just like about it in general, or was there a specific question about it?
Well, someone's asking you to talk about the ending, but I don't know if we can just talk about in general, like their conversation and both of their opinions, like the mother saying Anna should go home and Anna saying the mother should go home.
Yeah, well, I felt like it was kind of interesting that they both were on these paths very close to each other. And it seemed like that's who you don't really see the mother. So it seemed like that's who needed to find her. I guess that's sort of giving it away. But the conversation they have, I guess, is kind of like fantasy fulfillment. I wish I'd had that conversation with my mother. So that's probably where that came from. And I really like ending it on that note, like mother and daughter looking at this other person and their child and kind of thinking about the circle of life and how they got there. And I don't know what else to say about that scene. I like
so
it.
Tell us a little bit about how you came up with Zoya. Is that how we say her name? Zoya,
yeah. That was based on some family gossip that I heard about. So that's all I can probably say about that.
Yeah.
People should not tell me gossip if they don't want me to write about it, is all I have to say.
Right. Well, just looking at it in the novel, not in real life.
Well, that's how I came up with it. So.
Right. So,
I was kind of cheating, I guess.
But do we feel in the end that she was communicating with Anna because she really felt she was the daughter, or that it was a scam?
I like to leave that open to interpretation because it depends on like how cynical you are, where you take that.
Mm-hmm.
Like my Russian family members, I would assume would all be like, oh yeah, that's a scam for sure. But like, I don't think Anna would know that. And in the case I heard about, it was not a scam, but it was mixed up. Like it was not the person's daughter, but it could have been. So it wasn't a scam. It was just wrong.
Right.
So that's like the real life version I heard about. So I kind of feel like it's kind of open to interpretation of what you think. The way that I saw her was like, she really thought she was the sister, but got very impatient and really felt like she was owed something, like money, because, she had a hard life. And this other girl, the girls in America, she thought didn't have a hard life. And she felt like she was owed something. So she wanted money at the very least, if she couldn't get anything else she wanted.
Right.
Hope that explains some things. I do want to warn you, my phone might die. It's like 10%.
Uh-oh. All right. So let's quickly, if there's more questions, anybody has any other questions that they'd like to, Barbara, I'll call on you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I found the device, or whatever you want to call it, that you used to put Zoya kind of aside was great. To blame it on the lawyers. I just love that. I mean, I couldn't see a way out of how they were going to, and to say, well, you're never going to get anything because my father's going to hire a lawyer. He's not going to have any money left to give you. I just thought that was brilliant. I have to tell you.
They did end up paying her though. So Tristan ended up paying her.
Right.
But yeah,
stolen money.
Yeah. But also, yeah, like that's just how I would envision a character like my dad dealing with it. Like, rather give money to lawyers than deal with something like that. That's what I was imagining.
Right. So train hoppers, was that a real thing, or did you?
Oh yeah, that's a real thing. I get that question a lot because nobody knows about It's quite a subculture.
I mean, not since, I guess, since the Depression, I knew that people like train
now
hopping.
it's like
Then,
this whole subculture and everybody's like kind of highbrow about it weirdly, and they're like, you're not a train hopper, you're like not worth talking to. They're very snobby. I have had some friends who would do it, like my friend Vince, who August is based off of. They get into it, but they usually get out of it, because if you get really into it, you're just like homeless and a drug addict by the end eventually, because that's just what happens when you move around and you don't have any roots and you don't have any family. That's not a happy way to live.
right.
But yeah, it was a big thing in River West back then. I don't know how popular it is now, because I just don't follow those same types of people and subcultures, but definitely a thing. Definitely a thing. I got invited to hop many trains.
Oh,
I
really?
did not go.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't.
I was going to ask you what it was like.
Because Megabus is like $1. I was like, I'm just gonna pay. Megabus at the time was $1. I was like, I'm just gonna pay $1 on Megabus. I don't need to jump on this thing and then possibly break my leg. No, thank you.
Just to experience that lifestyle.
No, I just didn't want to. I definitely
Yeah.
now sometimes I'm like, maybe I should have just to try, but it's fine.
So, are there any other questions, Susan?
I haven't
we-
noticed any in the
Okay.
chat of ones we have had, you've asked.
Yes.
Yeah, I think most of our audience is kind of amazed to hear that there is a subculture of people jumping on and off a train still, much like the hobos did 100 years ago. But, you know,
And they dig in the
we didn't think
dumpsters
it's
for
today,
food.
but you know, who's to say that 10, 15 years ago, I mean, it may even still happen now with the way the economy is and the way people, you
Oh,
know.
it's still happening now. I've seen them here and there. I've seen
Is
them
it
here.
because were you seeing it this is in Milwaukee?
I've
that
seen
there's
them
the
actually
subculture there?
more recently. I've seen them saw them when I was living in Chicago, actually. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if they're coming up to Milwaukee lately, but they would like hang out in Wicker Park and beg for money. But it's
Oh,
like,
okay.
you don't know the train hopper look. You might not know they're train hoppers. You might just think that they're homeless people, which I guess technically they are. But they kind of dress a specific way and they have a particular smell. So I can spot them, but
Okay.
you might not be able to.
Yeah, I think part of it is that most of us are not going through the neighborhood next to the train depot, you know, where the freight trains would be. Because
No,
they're
well, they
going
come into the city to get money. They don't stay by the train.
Right.
Okay. But they're
So it's
taking
interesting
freight.
that you bring in the smell, because you did that in
Yeah.
your descriptions a lot.
Look,
You're very aware of.
It's an intense
It's
smell. You don't forget it. It's intense. I can smell it from across the room now. If there's a train hopper around.
Yeah. Wow.
That's
Okay, so
fascinating.
one last question, and people would like to know, they're asking what your parents think of the book, but I guess any relatives that have read your book.
I just know what my dad thinks. My mom actually died 10 years ago, so she hasn't read it. But my dad had a hard time believing me that I made up all the crime in the book, so he had a really hard time finishing it. And even though I told him like 100 times I did not steal or do any of this stuff, he just won't believe me, because some of the characters in the book are based off family members. So he thinks all of it is based off truth, which it's just not.
Right.
So he, I think, was proud of me for publishing it, though. He just like, I think it's hard for him to read, especially knowing a lot of the characters.
Yeah.
I think everyone I've talked, the few people I've talked to who know the characters who are based off people, it's like distracting because you're thinking of that person.
Mhm.
But other than that, a couple of my cousins read it and really liked it, and I really haven't heard much about it from anybody else. I have no idea. No idea.
All right,
Maybe
so maybe
they
your father
hated
will
it.
love he'll love your next one, because it'll be totally.
Actually, I don't think he will, and I told him not to read it because there's
Oh.
a romance in it, and I don't want him reading that.
No.
Okay, my phone's about to die, so I hope.
All right, so we want to thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much for
much.
coming. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
so much for
Zhanna.
having
Zhanna.
me.
Mhm.
I hope you all liked it, and hopefully you'll read the next book.
Next one.
All right.
All right, we look forward to reading your next one. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Bye-bye.
And with that, Merle, I think we've had a lovely conversation this evening. And I think everybody hopefully has felt they know a little bit more about the writing process. Some of our recent author interviewees, Julie Zuckerman, for example, talked about her writing style as, being one of a sort. And I'm trying to think of everybody's name that we had, but our recent authors all talked about whether they plan out their writing or they just run by the seat of their pants. And it just, they write furiously. Sometimes they edit out what they've written because it doesn't sit right to them. But, there's these two major veins of writing style. And we see from Zhanna's writing style, she tends to write quickly, especially when it comes to her, very quickly. So hopefully that inspires some of us as well. And Merle, I think the basic piece right now, I'm waiting for clarification from the Women's League office in New York about the publicity that we've pulled together, the event, 3 events organized.
Okay.
So we have November 17th is one date. I haven't refreshed my mind. Oh, yes, 8th of January, we have an Israeli author on the 8th of January, which is a Sunday. The 8th of January, 2023 at 1 in the afternoon Eastern time. Isn't that right?
Yep, I think so.
Merle? Okay. And the 17th of November is a Thursday evening.
Right.
And hopefully we will, once the office is finally moved, I don't know if any of you are aware of it, but the Women's League for Conservative Judaism office is in the process of moving from a Riverside Drive address on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to, I think it's interesting, they say it's Lower Manhattan, but it's really the south half of, it's near Penn Station, which is
8th Avenue, I think.
yeah, 8th Avenue in the 40s, I think.
Mhm.
And it's Penn Station has the Port Authority, so you have on the ground and above, you have massive buses, many buses coming in from New Jersey or coming in from Westchester County and coming to that point in Manhattan for people to get on subways. And you also have the train system coming from New Jersey and from Connecticut. Well, Connecticut is really Grand Central Station, but yeah, it's a location where they're in a suite with many other Jewish organizations, one of which is the Jewish Book Council, since we're talking on books here. And so my understanding from Debbie Goldich and Rabbi Wallens Fields is that they're really looking forward to being in this location, and that move is in process as of yesterday. So we have much to look forward to in the coming months. And I hope everyone has filled out their convention survey so that Edna Schrank, who is convention chair, co-chair with Rachel Ferber. I know both of these women because I'm part of Central Great Lakes region and I've served on the board of the region, and those two ladies have also served on the board. So that's the story there. And in a little while, we're having another Zoom meeting regarding there's a vote to be taken about, did anyone go to the 1 o'clock this afternoon meeting?
The bylaws changes.
The bylaws,
Oh.
yes.
No, I didn't.
Okay, so there was one at 1 this afternoon. Sandy, you said you had gone? Yeah, Sandy, you may need to unmute yourself.
Think I am now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can
Okay.
hear you.
There were, there were two topics that came up. I mean, there wasn't a formal presentation. It was just asking people, after they had read the information that had been sent out on the bylaws, if they had any questions and explanations. So trying to think, there was some discussion on the fact that they were reorganizing or want to reorganize, the bylaws, moving, aligning the when the international officers come in and the region officers. I guess some of the region presidents had mentioned that it was a little bit difficult to shift between, different administrations. And so in 2024, they're going to the regions are only going to have a 2-year administration, so that they can align the international and the region fiscal years starting and ending at the same time. And so that was one of the things that they talked about. Trying to remember what the other one was, but it was kind of, I think, similar along those lines.
So in the Women's League week, from this week, from 2 days ago, there was an announcement about this bylaws change, and there was like hyperlinks. If you clicked on certain boxes within the message, the Women's League week message about the bylaws changes to the documents that Sandy made reference to. So they're giving all the members in good standing an opportunity to be aware of these pro forma, rules, regulations, procedures, deadlines, dates, timeframes for different types of decisions to be made in terms of leadership roles. But some of the language had to deal with so many days ahead of the votes, the information needs to be disseminated or communicated out to the members so that they could have time to review and then be able to vote. So there's a lot of fine details if that's something that you find important to understand. So this afternoon at 1 o'clock, there was an opportunity via Zoom to listen to all these details and ask about them. And there'll be another meeting like that in about 15 minutes from now, since it's almost 8 o'clock.
Right.
So Merle and I had been asked to pace our interview with Zhanna Slor appropriately, which we, succeeded in doing, Merle. So
we'll end quick now so that everybody can go to
so that if you need a break, you can. And if it's on the Women's League week, from this week is a link to register if you want to join us. I'm going to participate in a short while in that, so I'm aware of things. So thank you again, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Linda, if you want to say something, you need to unmute yourself. You're just saying goodbye? All right. Thank you, Linda. Goodbye to everyone. Have everyone have a meaningful Shavuot this weekend. We have Shavuot 7 weeks after Passover. And hopefully, if you're going to study, you have an opportunity to study text. Meanwhile, everybody continue to be well. Have a lovely summer as well. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.